right, so welcome to everyone. Welcome to the first of our semicolon discussion sessions for 2021 at the Harriet Beecher Stowe House. Our first discussion today is the 1989, yes, it is that old, 1989 film Do the Right Thing by Spike Lee. We have and then after this one, we do have an exciting lineup of a lot of different types of books. So there will be book discussions in April, June, August, and October this year, always on the fourth Saturday at noon. So you can see the whole lineup, etc., on our website. At some point, you will be able to register for all of them. Right now, we are anticipating being online exclusively, at least through the April one, and then we will start to kind of reassess what it looks like for the rest of the year. I anticipate a potential kind of hybrid model where we do, you know, discussion here, but also have online participants. We don't know exactly how that's going to work yet, because we're just making this up as we go. So my name is Christina Hartley, and I am the Executive Director here at the Harriet Beecher Stowe House. Oh, I forgot to mention, we have a sponsor for this series. So the sponsor for the Semicolon Club this year is Donna's Fabulous Faux Furs in Covington. And Donna is actually, she was really great. She brought her grandkids to visit the house back in August, right before the school started. So back in August, they had set up an appointment. She and her grandkids came, and they completely loved it. So we were happy to bring Donna on board as a sponsor at the Harriet Beecher Stowe House. So that being said, I'm also anticipating, hoping that Prince will be joining us any minute now. Prince Johnson is the other co-host for today, and he is one of the board members here at the Harriet Beecher Stowe House. And so I bringing him on to get some additional perspective and some ideas in terms of the movie. But I gravitate towards this film primarily because it is a 30-year-old film and it's a fictional story, but everything that happens in it, except for the fact that Radio Raheem has a giant boombox, everything that happens in it could have happened for real just yesterday. And so it's one of these films that really has a timeless quality to it, which in a lot of ways is pretty unfortunate. But, you know, I want to look at some of those big kind of ideas that go along with it. And let's see, where do we want to start? We want to start, I think, with looking at the historical context. Because when we think about a film, think about when a film when a film was created, you know, it happens within a certain time and place. And so with the film Do the Right Thing was produced in 1989. So thinking about the historical setting of 1989, and particularly the racial violence in New York City, because the movie is set in Brooklyn, the racial violence in New York City in the 1980s. So one of the things that I did in the last week is I, pulled off an article that is actually by one of the contributors. I listened to a podcast called Code Switch on NPR, and Gene Denby has been the moderator and producer of that particular podcast for several years now. And one of his articles was talking about kind of this setting of the historical context. So in the 1980s, the New York City was setting all-time highs for crime. There were over 2,000 homicides in 1990, and the issue of race was kind of rolling beneath the surface for many of the high-profile incidents that happened in the 1980s. So I'll give you some examples that Mr. Denby outlined, and that is there was a black transit worker named Willie Turks who was beaten to death by a white mob in 1982. In 1984, Bernhard Goetz shot 4 black teenagers on the subway, and then later said that they were threatening him, but that was not really panned out. In 1986, a black teenager named Michael Griffith was beaten to death by a gang of white youths in Howard Beach, Queens. And at one point during the movie, the crowd is shouting Howard Beach because whatever is happening in that scene is reminding them of that incident. In 1989, a teenager named Yusuf Hawkins was beaten to death by a mob in Brooklyn, which was an Italian neighborhood. And then the best known crime was the rape and brutal beating of a white woman who was jogging in Central Park. The 5 black teenagers were charged and eventually convicted of the crime. That was the subject of a recent documentary, which I have not seen. What's the name of that documentary?
When They See Us, directed by Ava DuVernay. And it wasn't a documentary, it was an actual film. Okay,
thank you. So, that had just happened. And then Tawanna Brawley was also in 1989. She was raped, stuffed in a trash bag, and had racial slurs written on her. She accused 5 white men of the crime, including a police officer and a prosecutor. Now, since that time, those were not convicted, and I don't know, exactly how it transpired in terms of, they claim that she was not telling the truth in that. I think Spike Lee would beg to differ, since on one scene of the movie, he has a graffiti on a wall saying Tawanna told the truth. So that is still kind of, there's all these speculative things, but overall, this is the context of the film and the context in which it was created. So I will open it up to where you want to start talking, or what things you want to bring out. I've got kind of a list of ideas and questions, and so does Prince, but we'll get started with, where do you want to start with discussion? What are your most pressing ideas, thoughts?
Well, I've got one.
Gina, Gina is also, I'm sorry, Gina is also one of our board members.
Thanks, Christina. What I see in that movie, what I remember from that movie, is there was a sense of community. You got the 2 store owners, I think the guy who owned the pizzeria, then another person, a Korean person owned something. But even though there was conflict, there was always, in the beginning of the movie, it was like they were a community, albeit there were issues. I did see a sense of community as the underlying line throughout the whole movie. But yeah, I think Spike Lee took a bold move here, and I'm glad he did, because I thought it was a very honest movie. It was it made me, like someone else said, it made you cry, it made you laugh, and like I was saying earlier, Samuel L. Jackson, crackhead in the movie.
Wasn't he? I thought he was
he was a DJ. He wasn't a crackhead. He was a crackhead.
Sorry, somebody else was.
Yeah, he was the crackhead in Jungle Fever, not in
I'm
this
sorry,
one.
I'm getting it mixed up with Jungle Fever. Thanks for fixing that. But he was he in Do the Right? Maybe he wasn't even in Do the Right.
No, he
was. He wasn't to Do the Right Thing.
He
was
wasn't
DJ.
Do the Right Thing as the DJ.
Yep.
That's right. Okay, and he did Coming to America and a few other things, but yeah, those are my first observations.
So a huge sense of community on this particular street. Okay. Other initial thoughts or things that strike you as important underlying things within the film itself?
I thought it was really powerful that he kept this common thread of love throughout the whole movie. Mm-hmm. Even at the end, when, you know, right before the credits, he has that long statement, I think from Martin Luther King. You know, I imagine back then there was even more anger, and for him to produce something like this and have this message of we all need to unite, we all need to love each other, I thought that was pretty amazing. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. The thing that for me is about he brought out the implications of police brutality, you know, with the death of Radio Raheem. So it was definitely ahead of his time in regards to that. So, because unfortunately, you know, as of, you know, it keeps happening in this day and age. So one of the things that he did bring up was, you know, the, you know, basically, you know, granted, cell phones weren't popular back then in '89. I think it was when we had those little brick looking ones. So, but it wasn't, and it was like the way he, you know, Radio Raheem died was basically, you know, with Eric Gardner and with George Florida, how, you know, basically how he died, basically just choking them to death. So it's definitely, you know, Spike Lee was way ahead of his time in regards to, you know, that particular subject.
Mm-hmm. So, you know, the kind of the background is all of this racial tension and violence throughout New York through the 80s, and not all of it is directed from the police, but in this particular, in the movie, it is the police that crossed the line in terms of the racial violence and the killing of one of the characters. Yes. Okay. And, you know, since you already mentioned it, let's think about Radio Raheem's death for just a minute. He was not shot by the police. How did he die? By choking. But when they filmed that, what does it look like, per se, with the filming of it?
Eric Gardner.
Yes. Yeah. And even historically speaking, it almost looks like, Amy?
It almost looks like a lynching, especially the way his feet shake at the bottom. So it's definitely implied he stopped breathing.
Yes. So basically he's lifted up in the air and he's choking, and yeah, you see his feet at the, you know, kind of kicking, and then they stop. And that definitely, you know, gives the impression of it is the same thing as a lynching, so to speak. Well, that's a heavy thing to start off with, but yeah. But it is, you know, front and center right there in the film. What are some other big ideas or topics? So we have community, we have the you know, yes, demonstrating the police violence and the killing of just an ordinary person because of that. Any other big themes that you want to bring out? Sarah?
Oh, sorry. Hi, this is Sarah. So to be honest, I actually don't know that I think Spike Lee's message is one of propelling people toward unity. I think that the fact that he countered the Martin Luther King quote with the Malcolm X quote, I wouldn't say he's advocating violence either, but I think that film is so beautiful in part because it captures the deep pain and the complexity of this, like, even minuscule small situations that eventually spiral into things like this. And I mean, there was definitely a sense of love, I thought, between, or if not love, at least like fondness between Mookie and Sal at the end there. But they didn't, sorry, I apologize. I'm in the car. I'm almost to where my destination is. But they didn't seem like they exactly reconciled either. I think they ended things on kind of tense terms, and just like the heat the summer heat that was, there's no end in sight. I think that that was kind of part of the theme as well, as the fact that this is not an issue that, you know, that can easily be reconciled, and unification, ultimate unification is really hard. And so I don't know that he was offering a solution per se, but just kind of showing the pain that leads up to this.
Yeah. Brandy?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, I don't know if it was necessarily a theme he was going for, but a theme that I got from it was self-reflection. Because although it makes you angry, it also makes you question, well, how do you really look at your neighbors that aren't the same color as you? How do you really think? What do you really think of your friends that aren't the same color as you? Do you have underlying hidden racist things that you might think, or things that you might say jokingly with, for instance, if I'm Black and I'm making a joke about white people with my Black friends, that kind of self-reflection later on, I have to sit back and go, well, why would I say something like that? And I have white people that I love. Why would I say that about Black people and I have Black people that I love? So I think he was kind of going for that too, like, step back and take a look at yourself and how you are in your community. What are you perpetuating in your community?
I would, yeah.
Can I jump in and say that, you know, kind of back up with Randy just said, maybe like exposing implicit bias?
Yeah.
Well, exposing implicit bias, but overtly exposing the bias in terms of, there's the one scene where there's the characters break the fourth wall. They're looking straight at the camera and they go on a tirade rant about another racial or ethnic group. And, you know, what are all the horrible things you can call someone of a different group? So it's underlined. And I think that scene where, you know, they are talking directly to the camera is bringing this implicit stuff out and, you know, underline everything that we are doing, saying, thinking behind the scenes, and actually saying it right in front of the camera. And he has the, you know, Mookie does it and Vito does it. And then he also has the Korean grocery store owner and one of the Puerto Rican kids and one of the police officers, I think, are all part of that scene where they're talking directly to the camera. So yeah, just all of this underlying implicit bias. What about, so one of my kind of main thought patterns is that nothing is done by accident in this movie. Everything has a purpose. So let's kind of talk about some of the purposes. You know, all of the costuming and props are a deliberate choice by the director and whatever, you know, whoever else was on his design team, so to speak. What colors are most of the clothing and most of the, you know, kind of backdrop and scenery?
Well, there seem to be some generational differences. Like Ozzie Davis's character, he was very dapper, and you know, so but like the younger people had the Jordans. I loved the Jordans. I'm sorry, it was like a total. I saw this movie when I was in high school, and it took me back. But there were also a lot of African themed outfits. Like Samuel Jackson's DJ character had his definite themes. So there seemed to be some variation. I also personally thought it was interesting that the two brothers, one had a black t-shirt on and the other had a white t-shirt on, which I found fascinating. And I think that was very purposeful.
Sarah,
the color red was very prominent. In
the color red is very prominent, yes, and I think that has to do with the heat. But
yeah,
Sarah,
I felt hot. I actually felt hot watching the movie. I remember thinking, boy, those people are sweating, and you know, it just that came through in the way he staged the different scenes. So.
I was gonna say, does the red, can that also sort of signify blood in the streets?
So red to denote the hot, but also red that denotes the blood kind of aspect.
She brings up a good point, because I think that red, it did show rage, because just about at least 3 or 4 of the scenes in the movie were based on real life incidents. And I think he was trying to show the rage, the anger, the pain, the frustration that people felt over those incidents. And the ironic thing is the incident with I think the Korean store owner shot someone or whatever, that has happened 3 or 4 times since the movie.
I remember Latasha Harlan, when the Korean store owner thought that she was stealing and she actually wasn't, and she shot her in the head, and it was, a young girl.
Okay, so we have a couple of people with their hands up, and I want to make sure that they get a chance. So Sarah, you're next to say something.
Hi all. So I don't know if I'm remembering this right, but I also could have sworn that Mookie was wearing a Jackie Robinson jersey, which I think was definitely sort of like a callback to the fact that there are both, well, and actually even the whole thing about getting Black heroes up on the wall, this idea that this is a conflict, this tension is something that has existed in a lot of other formats long before this sort of snapshot on a Brooklyn street, and I think that was intentional on his part, but like alongside the chanting about Howard Beach and the incident there.
We could talk a lot about jerseys, but Jacqueline, go ahead, and then I'll circle back to that idea.
Okay, so it's going to piggyback on like the costuming, and as well as you're talking about themes, and one of the things that struck me is like, this is when hip hop was, really becoming, like popular. And then like, this is the golden age of hip hop. So they had, with Rosie Perez doing the dance at the beginning, then like all the hip hop, attire, whereas, you have all these bright colors and wearing the Jordans and wearing the, just wearing the tank tops and all that stuff like that. And then also with Public Enemy having the from the soundtrack Fight the Power. So it definitely, for me, it's more like, it was more of a like, okay, this is a hip hop generation. This is what, because I'm a music head. So that kind of brought me, to the attention of, another thing I think that he might have, intentionally or unintentionally did in regards to, like putting that element of hip hop in the movie. And then also, sidebar, Ruth E. Carter, who did the costuming. The same woman who won for Black Panther. Yeah, she did the costuming for because she's been a long time collaborator with Spike Lee for years. So yeah.
Isn't she up for some more awards? I think she's up for some more awards.
She recently was inducted to the Hollywood Walk of Fame on Thursday, and she's the second costume designer to be included in this honor. So
good. Okay. So I'm gonna mention one thing about the music, and that is a lot of you might know, but I used to be a high school social studies teacher, and I had playlists for everything. I mean, I had a Cold War playlist, and I had I taught 10th grade when they did the Ohio graduation test, the OGT test, and I had an OGT playlist where, a song from each, kind of topic that we were supposed to be learning. Anyway, but I had a protest song playlist, and of course, Fight the Power was on that particular playlist as well. So, but let me go back to a couple of the costuming things. So in addition to the Jackie Robinson jersey that Mookie wears while he's delivering pizzas, what are some other jerseys that you saw in the movie, and what did they denote? Amy, I see your hand up.
I saw the Larry Bird jersey on like the white guy on his bike who rode right over his shoes. Like, yeah, that could not have been a whiter character. I'm sorry, it just could not have been. I know that's not PC to say, but
exactly. Right, exactly. So it was a white character kind of demonstrating perhaps the coming gentrification of the neighborhood because I believe Bedford-Stuy is now more gentrified. I'm not 100% positive. Maybe somebody who knows more about New York knows. But yes, so that
It definitely is.
Okay, so definitely yes. So it is the white character coming into the situation, completely oblivious to what's going on around him, and yes, wearing the Larry Bird jersey, which if you're not a basketball fan, he was big in the 70s and 80s and pretty much the only white, he was the white basketball player. He went to Indiana State. I grew up in Indiana, so I was well aware of him. Any other jerseys that you saw?
I think, and I don't know the relevance of this, but I feel like in one of the opening scenes, he's wearing a Michael Jordan jersey.
Yeah, so when it first starts, the first time you see Mookie, he is wearing a Michael Jordan jersey when he wakes up.
And I wasn't sure if that was just Spike Lee's love, because I know he's such a fan. I was like, oh, is that just a personal thing, or is more to it?
Well, I think it says something to the character of Mookie that he's wearing a Michael Jordan jersey, he's wearing a Jackie Robinson jersey, so these things are kind of within what his character would wear, so to speak. All right.
It's also interesting. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Gina.
Yeah, it's also interesting that one of the characters has on a Muscle Man shirt. Yeah, when I was a kid, we called them muscle T-shirts. Where it's like, no, it's called a wife beater. Sorry.
Yes.
He's got on a wife beater, and that, I think dressing him that way shows us a little bit about him. And the racist dude, I'm looking at this thing on the internet. He wears all black in classic villain fashion, But yeah, I think whoever did the costuming did a great job.
With E. Carter.
All right. So yes, so the wife beater type T-shirts that the two brothers wear, and the one that is the more racist wears the white T-shirt, and the one who I think is trying to bridge the groups, who's much more friendly with Mookie, is actually wearing a black tank top muscle shirt. Yes. All right. How do they denote? How do they show that it's hot outside? I mean, how can you just physically tell that it's hot outside?
Everybody's sweating.
There's a lot of like shower scenes too. Like the one lady, yeah, she just like put ice in the bathtub and was like taking a bath.
So showers, showing people sweating. Brandy, you want to add to that, please?
Yeah, and I don't know if I'm remembering this correctly, but isn't it a part where Mookie's girlfriend actually complains about the heat before he leaves out, like complaining about it?
Yeah, they're always like, it is so hot. and even the DJ, really. I mean, he's talking about it at the beginning. Sarah?
Yeah, I was going to say, I read somewhere that Spike Lee actually used cans of Sterno, like they'd open them right near the camera so that wave effect of heat wafting off the sidewalks would happen, which I thought was, not once I read that, I was like, oh yeah, he does that a lot in this movie. That it definitely makes you feel, like somebody said earlier, like you're actually in the heat with them. Like I had to take a blanket off while I was watching it.
You felt hot, right?
And I think Tina, his girlfriend, sits in front of the fan, just sits right in front of the fan.
I think his sister does that too, but yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, you just all throughout, you see people sweating, and it looks hot, and they're taking these cold showers, and yeah, it is. Gina, are you okay? Uh-oh. All right.
I thought I was muted when I was coughing. Sorry about that.
Okay. All right.
Also, sorry, just adding to the heat, I love the scene where Mookie lies on top of his sister, kind of, and she's like, I mean, you just feel the heat, like how uncomfortable that would be.
It's like, oh, please get off of me. Yes, like that. Okay, hang on. I'm trying to get, Prince is having a lot of technical difficulties. So let me see if I can figure out what else. So talk about, while I'm dealing with this, talk about the camera angles. Somebody jump in there. Any camera angle issues?
I can't remember the camera angles, but I remember the pure honesty of this movie. I like the fact that Spike Lee was willing to, as they say, call a spade a spade. I mean, he went to places where other filmmakers have never gone. I mean, he used the N-word, but he also pulled out all the words that Black people have for white people. And I remember as a kid, my dad was a Green Beret, and he told us once that one of his fellow Green Beret brothers, a white guy, called him the N-word. So he started laughing at him. And the guy said, "Why are you laughing?" He said, "That's the only word y'all really have for us. We got about 20 for you." And so he started rattling them off. And they were friends, don't get me wrong. But I think what Spike was trying to do was to take the hurt off that word. But I think here we are years and years later, you can't remove the hurt from that word, but you can bring out the fact that it hurts. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So I think he and a lot of young people from his generation, they try to say the word like it's, you know, saying hello or goodbye or whatever, and that just doesn't work anymore. But he used it in the movie in such a way that he let the white people in that movie know that does not sting me. I got worse words for you, and he used them. So it was interesting, you know.
Well, there was a moment though where Sal used that word in the pizzeria, and the young people were appalled because you could tell they're like, "Oh, that's what you really think of us? So you're mad, and now you're mad, and so the truth's coming out, and that's what you really think of us," and that started the fight.
That's
so I
right.
think that it still has power. Words definitely still have a lot of power.
Okay, we have a couple of hands raised. So Sarah's at the top of the list, and then Brandy.
Actually, I wanted to say I appreciated Brandy's comment earlier, and it relates to the camera angles question, because I had been thinking that Spike Lee is just a master of beautiful camera angles, and I hadn't thought about the meaning of it. But I think Brandy's right that, like, maybe a theme, I think it was Brandy that said that a theme of the movie is that self-reflection and asking yourself, what is my vantage point here? Because there's so many cool camera angles where it's essentially like Sal's perspective on Radio Raheem getting in his face, or the Korean shop owner's perspective on one of the guys from across the street kind of getting in his face, and everybody feeling confrontation and what that would actually feel like if you were living in that person's skin. Or even Rosie Perez or Mookie, I forget who does this, but they dunk their head into a thing of water and ice, and the perspective is like you can see their face as if you're underwater. So I feel like he's very intentional about these very intimate angles, probably as a way to reinforce, like, what would you do if you were in this situation, if you were this person.
Go ahead, Brandy.
I was gonna say, this is kind of off topic, but another thing I found interesting was that with the older character, who probably grew up in a time, well, not probably, who grew up in a time where the racism was much more open and there was nothing he could do about it. I found it interesting that he was the one more so pushing for peace, as to where the younger characters were the ones more prone towards violence, as if to be like, well, you're not going to take us back to where he came from. So that was interesting to me, that the older gentleman, who probably suffered far more than those younger guys could ever even imagine, was actually the one trying to push for everybody to be peaceful and to love each other and to calm each other down, as to where the younger generation was like, well, we're not standing for that. You're not going to push us to the back of the bus, so to speak, the way this old man was. We want you to know we're going to stand up for ourselves. So I just found that kind of interesting too, where like I said, the older gentleman, I mean, there's no telling what he probably suffered in his day when he was their age. But he was
Right.
still like, no, let's just love each other and be peaceful.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. All right, I'm going to take a quick break here for just a second and introduce and welcome Prince Johnson, who is online now. He was having some technical difficulties. But I'm going to say, Prince, we have talked about historical context. We've talked a lot about different themes and ideas, and really kind of gone through the list that I shared with you on, kind of the nothing is done by accident thing. We haven't gotten to the role purpose section yet, but why don't you take a minute to just introduce yourself, and then if you want to kind of talk about some of your broad questions too.
Thanks, you all. It's really great to be here in this space. My name is Prince Edward Johnson II, born and raised in Cincinnati. Came from Evanston, the educating community here in Cincinnati. An international teacher. I taught in all throughout Asia and parts of Europe, and I wanted to come back home to do some really good work. And I'm a PhD student right now at the University of Miami in the Education Leadership program. A lot of my research interest is really around the legacy of abolitionism, right? And then, how does that translate into building pedagogy? How does that relate into building curriculums? And, how to revive abolitionism as a political rhetoric, and how to have those discussions in public spaces. So it's really good, honestly, to be here in this space along with those things. And deeply apologize for our weird internet connection issues, but nonetheless, this is like one of my favorite films, actually, Do the Right Thing. I watched that with my older brothers, like growing up and things like that. And I haven't watched it in a long time. It was probably like maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago. So the thing that I always come back to when thinking about this particular film is, what are some of the material conditions, economically speaking, that actually exacerbate some of these issues that Do the Right Thing is trying to highlight. And so I'm always coming at it from a class first analysis with everything, and thinking about the ways in which conditions of class creates some of these tensions between different identities and things like that. So
yeah, and that's actually something that we haven't discussed here yet, in terms of, you have this neighborhood that is primarily African American and Puerto Rican in terms of the residents, but who are the people that own the businesses here? You've got the Italian family and the Korean family. So I've got a hand raised. It just says J Investment. I'm not sure what your real name is, but go ahead.
Good afternoon. My name is Sammy. How are you all doing?
Good.
Great. He spoke just a second ago about classism, and I think you guys were just recently talking about perspectives and camera angles. And I think one of the interesting parallels would probably be what you just spoke about, as far as classism being a major thing, as to where we had the 3 older gentlemen who seemingly made it very known of the history of businesses being in the area, and also agreed that me being my hometown, Detroit, Michigan, gentrification is at an all-time high, where we do have a lot of individuals who do come and businesses are being built and the black dollar is not being valued even in 1989. So it was almost as if he hopped into the DeLorean and traveled to the future in 2020 and filmed a movie and went back and documented it. It's exactly the same way now. Every other corner, you see the proverbial liquor store. Now you're starting to see different produce sections and things of that nature that are dominating the area right now. But if you really look back closely, that's just one of the angles. And the second angle for me would be, and it's not really a popular topic nowadays, but if you recall correctly, his own sister highlighted the fact that he had a tough time keeping a job, and he really wasn't being a good father. So we have to kind of look at, when we talk about camera angles, that's one of the most, for me personally, kind of the critical thing in that, because she was pro go back to work. Why are you taking such long work breaks? Go back to work for Sal, which inherently she kind of had a little crush on, so to speak, and Sal knew that. So we just talked about business owning, we talked about fatherhood, and then finally we're talking about interracial minority dating, because if you remember, Mookie was not a big fan of Sal and his sister, but Mookie's son's mother was a minority as well. So we got a lot of parallels that we got to think about here. And, you know, he wasn't very happy knowing that Sal took a keen interest in giving her food comped, so to speak.
Yeah, no, that's another whole storyline there that you could explore and talk about. Yeah. But so let's go back to the three old guys who sit on the corner. And what is their role or purpose in the movie? Why are they there? Brandy, yeah, you might not. Sorry, you might have.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
I asked that question. Go ahead.
I actually was kind of piggybacking off of something that Sam just said. When he's talking about the gentrification, it kind of delves you into that argument about the wall. It's his wall in his store. Does he have the right to put the people that he wants from his, culture up on the wall? Or should he be respecting the people of that community and putting their people up on the wall? So it kind of throws you into a whole nother argument, because it's like, yes, it's his store, and, he can do whatever he wants to with his property, but should his loyal customers have any say so on what they're going to constantly see in their community?
Yeah, and that really comes to the crux of things. John? I can't hear you.
That's what I was going to say. The movie keeps asking, what's more important, property or lives? And that comes up, it's important at the end of the movie too, but I think private property is not an absolute right. I think it carries responsibilities with it. And if you're taking a lot of money from that community, if that's where your livelihood is coming from, whether legally or not, ethically, morally, you owe people a spot on that wall.
All right. So so the whole there's a history of boycotts that is an underlying theme as well. Does Mookie, or does Bugging Out's idea of having a boycott of Sal's, does that go anywhere? Does anybody else want to do it? Why would they want to do it? What's the whole boycott issue, so to speak? Amy?
Well, it kind of reminded me of the Coca-Cola boycott that had to do with apartheid in South Africa. So at about the same time, there was a big boycott about not drinking Coca-Cola because they were supporting companies and they were supporting, or the theory was that their company was in part supporting apartheid, and that boycott actually got them to disengage from South African politics. But so it kind of reminded me of that, and it seemed like Radio Raheem was totally on board with the boycott, but I believe he was the only one. I mean, Mookie was like, no, don't do this, don't mess with this, but Radio Raheem was totally like, I'm gonna boycott too.
And right, and everybody else just wanted to eat their pizza, right?
Yeah.
Right.
They're really good pizza.
I don't know. Okay. So all right, so let's go back to my question about the old guys. The three old guys who sit on the street corner all day, and they got the red wall behind them, so that really it's like denoting the heat, and they're sitting outside and they're sweating the whole time. And so what is their role or purpose in the movie, so to speak?
I think, I think Ossie Davis' character is the lifeline of sort of the history of African Americans in this country. Because when you really think about it, had it not been for people like Ossie Davis, like my grandfather and others, who really took a lot of crap, yet still they found the wisdom to forgive, not hold grudges, and to continue on. I think they really represent the continuity of the Black race in America. Because if you really think about it, it's a terrible thing for me to say, but if anybody had a right to kill some folks, it would be Black people.
Right.
I mean, really, when you really look at it, you kidnap me from my country, you make me a slave for about 200 years, then Jim Crow, then all kinds of discrimination. I mean, if you were thinking like someone who had no religious foundation, you would say, yeah, it's time to get them. But thanks to the grace of God and people like the Ossie Davis character, Black people did not react to slavery that way because they had found Jesus, so to speak, and they had found this common denominator of survival for their children. And that is sort of comes through in the movie in that it shows Ossie Davis is maintaining that continuum, and he's saying, I'm not going with that eye for an eye. Everything will work out. God's going to work it out in the end. And the other characters show how it was during the Civil Rights Movement, where you got Martin Luther King saying peace, demonstration, peaceful demonstration, blah, blah, blah. And then you got Stokely Carmichael and everybody else like, forget that, man. That doesn't work. It's time to kick some butt now. So I think the movie shows that. And that's where those three old men come in for me, especially Ossie Davis. I mean, if it weren't for the Ossie Davises of the Black community, like the Ossie Davis in that community, no telling what could have happened.
So I want to point that Wilbrod said something in the chat that there, wonder at the tensions raised of the political strategies. So on the one hand, the accommodationist stance, which we usually associate with Martin Luther King, and then the other, the more confrontational and direct programs, which we usually associate with Malcolm X, and that's in the context of the civil rights movement. If you go farther back, you can see that same type of tension between Booker T. Washington and W.E.B. Du Bois. But you've got, in the context of the civil rights movement, this accommodationist versus confrontational, and then you've got the mentally challenged character who's, trying to sell these pictures of the, Martin Luther King and Malcolm X together. And what does he end up doing at the very end? He puts that up on the wall of fame, his picture of the two of them. So, so there's a lot of underlyingness of those two political strategies as well. Amy has a hand up.
Got it. So regarding the three gentlemen who kind of sit on the corner, they seemed to have three different economic debates. Well, one economic debate with three different perspectives as to whose community it is, who has the right to have a business. And I think there were a couple of times, because they had different scenes, it sort of broke up some of the tension to give that narration, where one guy was like, I'm going to have my business. And the other two were like, yeah, right. You've been saying that for how long now? And so, but still, that's the conversation that they were having, that people, I think, are still having all these years later. How do we help some of the Black-owned businesses to be more prosperous in neighborhoods and so on? But that seemed to, and it also broke up a lot of the tension with some comedy as well. Those characters did.
Yeah. Sam, I saw your hand next.
Yes, ma'am. I kind of want to piggyback what she just said. I think that it also emphasized the disparity of lack of entrepreneurial spirit in that time. Because if you think about it, a lot of pizza shops, stores, again, produce places were owned by individuals that weren't in that community. And it was at an alarming rate. Whereas, as you said, the one gentleman was actually pressing, so to speak, Mookie to buy from him, which technically he was an entrepreneur. He was selling photos to probably get some cigarettes. And the funny thing about it for me is that if you really kind of look at the dialogue that the gentleman had in the middle, they were in the median of both sides. And to me personally, it kind of took a light to shine to say they actually compared the time frame. And I don't want to misquote it, but I believe the gentleman said, these folks have been here less than a year and already got a business going. So in my mind, I was thinking, wow, if you can observe individuals and their entrepreneurial gift within less than a year, well, damn, you can do the same thing. You know what I mean? So it was kind of interesting that those guys had so much to say about it, yet the end result is, well, I don't care what you guys talking about. Let me go get a Miller beer. And if you really remember that it ended by, I don't care what you guys saying. Let me go get a Miller beer. You know what I mean? So it's disheartening to the fact. But when she said that this movie was so organically true, that it was.
All right, Brandy.
I was gonna say, as far as the film bridging the gap from then to now, it's a scene in the film where Mookie and his sister are like sitting on the curb and they're just so shocked at what's happening in front of them that all they can do is sit there and stare. And it kind of reminds me of what everything went through with the George Floyd case. Like all you could do was sit there and stare with your mouth gaped open and go, I can't believe this is happening right in front of me. And it's just funny that in that scene, Mookie and his sister are doing the same thing. They're just sitting on the curb as if to go, we don't even know what to do other than sit here and stare because this is so unbelievable to us that it's just like, what do you do? What can I do but sit here and watch this unfold in front of me?
Yeah. John, you want to add to that?
Yes, I think that people were talking a little bit ago about Ossie Davis and his character of the mayor, who he's from the older generation. He preaches conciliation, but Spike Lee, who is of course a big fan of the whole history of Malcolm X, would have known that Ossie Davis preached the eulogy for Malcolm X, and was a friend, an associate of Malcolm X. Not that he wasn't in the Nation of Islam during that phase with Malcolm, but he admired Malcolm, and he said he represents our black manhood, and because he stood up. And so I think even that character, Spike Lee, and I think he hopes the audience will be aware of that complexity, that again, you can't, to me, that's one of the genius things about the movie, that it lets all these voices be heard and then leaves it up to you, to me, the audience, to try to resolve it and figure out what to do.
And I feel like there's so much to his character, like the thread of his character throughout the whole movie. Even the scene where he saves the boy who's about to get hit by the car, and the mother comes out and is beating him, and he's like, well, no, don't do that. And then kind of apologizes for, there's so much it's a very complex character. I found him to be really interesting throughout it. And even the end where he spends the night with Sister Mother, and they've kind of, become friends at this point, and they wake up and the flowers are there. There's all these little secret messages that I think get, if you really watch it closely, you can pick up on. But I thought their relationship and his character was, you saw him kind of progress throughout the whole thing, which was interesting to watch.
Any
Briefly
other
about Malcolm X. Oh, sorry.
What about Malcolm X?
I don't know if the movie brought it out, but what a lot of people forget about Malcolm X is when Malcolm X went to Mecca and he actually understood what the true Muslim religion was about versus the Nation of Islam of Black Muslims in the United States,
Mm-hmm.
he changed a lot of his views and he changed a lot of his perspective. He stopped calling white people blue-eyed devils because when he got over to Mecca, he saw there were Asian, white, all kinds of nationalities that were Muslims. And I think history often brings up Malcolm, and young people forget that Malcolm took a turn, and Malcolm may have even been killed by the Muslims. We still don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, another, important Spike Lee movie is the Malcolm X biography. Is it just called the Autobiography of Malcolm X?
Based on, well, it's just Malcolm X, but it's based on his autobiography.
Right. And it's a 3-hour movie, but if you've got time, it is worth it in terms of watching the trajectory of Malcolm X from his early days to when he went to prison to what happens to him as he comes out of prison and so forth. So, yeah, but go ahead. Prince.
Yeah, I'm buzzing with so many different, points here. And I will have to say that I am very, very critical of this film, in particular in the ways in which Black radical thought is reinterpreted, right, within this film and just with all films. I personally cannot trust that any film that is produced accurately says the whole story. And, I'm familiar with Spike, and I know that with his work, and I think he tried his best to problematize these things, but okay, I'm all over the place. So that's one thing, right? I kind of want to go back to this whole idea of the guy drinking beer, right, and not being in entrepreneurialism. I like to go there because, why is it that what is it between this Black male that he would rather disassociate himself from the entrepreneurial spirit and just to have a beer? So I think that maybe it's because of the society that we're in. We're kind of taught with the American spirit, you have to build up yourself by your bootstraps. But what if Black people are essentially feel disenfranchised from the whole race towards property to begin with? And, and so I don't know, I'm doing a research project right now where I'm interviewing kids, high school teenagers who are working in jobs around here. And I'm trying to see the ways in which Black folks feel alienated by their best efforts, right? With trying to come up, right? And I don't honestly think Black people have a problem with working hard. You can't, come on, we accumulated capital, right, for this country, and what's there to say that that these things are these slave dynamics are still alive and present with us to this day? If you look at Ohio, right, there's more white folks in Ohio on welfare, and there's more white poverty in Ohio than anywhere else because, right, it's a larger population. But at the same time, though, there's a higher concentration of joblessness and poverty and welfare recipients here, and we only make up 13%. So for me, when I think about the guy, right, who wants to have a beer, what if that is an act of rebellion within itself, right? What if it's just man, we've done all this, you collapse into decadence, right? And I think that those should be real conversations to be had, and especially when it comes to Black people's relationship to capital, Black people's relationship to business. Selling shea butters, across the hood is not going to uplift the hood, at the end of the day. And I think what this film does for me is it beautifully raises the contradictions that we see in our society to the point that, we have to really be real about these things. And that's why I'm here. We got to have that talk. So do the right thing. It depends upon, debating oneself against history. So I don't know. I'm all over the place. That's just me. That's just me.
We have a couple of hands up. Brandy was next.
I had to write something down because I'm like, my memory goes. So the first point that I wanted to bring up was, I think the movie also points out that as much as things change, they stay the same. Kind of going back to what you guys were saying about when Raheem's feet are shaking because he's being choked, and it kind of compares the way people would, you know, shake when they were being strung up or lynched. It kind of shows you that as much as things change in society, there are certain things that just say this, that just stay the same. And what is it that we can do to finally make that push to make it change? It kind of makes you think, what can we do to finally stop certain things from happening? And then I wanted to go back to the point that she made about Malcolm X, with the way later in his life, closer to his death, the way his point of view changed after he was exposed to something different. I think that's what another thing that Spike was kind of going for with the movie. It was like, well, maybe after somebody sees this, maybe their point of view will change after being exposed to something different.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right. Amy had her hand up too. Go ahead.
So I had a couple of things. The first thing, I hadn't really realized until we were just discussing, like, Spike, this is a Spike Lee joint, right? So that's what he calls his films. He had to create his own production company to create this film. And I believe this was the first one that launched him into the filmmaking stratosphere. Obviously there are others that came after. So I find that fascinating. It's kind of like Oprah had to create her own company and Tyler Perry had to create his own company to have these voices and these stories being told because they weren't otherwise being heard and told. So, I mean, as just a piece of art, I find that kind of interesting. But the other thing, and it came out of last year, so I'm sure everyone's seen it by now, but oh yeah, thank you, Prince. So She Gotta Have It was the first one, because I was thinking of like some of the later films. So Kim Johnson, I think her video in Minneapolis went viral explaining it's her Monopoly analogy about 400 years of not being able to be economically stable as a Black community, and using a Monopoly as her analogy to explain that, which was so impactful, and it's like stuck with me this whole year. I was thinking of her discussion of how the injustice of that economic situation while watching this film, and obviously that would not have been true, or at least that would not have been true for me to look at it through that lens in '89, but it's definitely true in 2000 and whatever year this is. What year is it? 2021. So it feels like it's been a decade already. But yeah, I mean, just that whole perspective that she gave last summer was very impactful in how I saw the film this time around.
Who was that, Amy?
Kim Johnson. She writes YA novels, but the idea that she presented and her in her video, I know you can get it on YouTube, is that imagine if you were playing Monopoly, but for the first 200 rounds, you couldn't collect any money when you passed go. And then after you could collect money, people took it. And so for however many rounds after you could actually collect money, it was taken from you. So she says it way better than I just did, but that's a very brief summary.
Okay.
I'm so glad she said that, because that is the American dream right there. It's a race. So you as a white person, you started on the race before me, because your ancestors had owned land, owned property, may have owned slaves. Not necessarily, but here you have someone who was a slave, who from slavery built themselves up, and they are on the same race. But then someone says, well, why don't you own your own business like that guy from Saudi Arabia? And you look at him and you're like, do you realize what opportunities he had when he got off the boat from Saudi Arabia? He was an immigrant. I didn't come here on my own. I worked my way up. And the miraculous thing about Black people is that we are achieving. And we're achieving in spite of that, slow start, because someone got an advantage in the race. And I got to say one more thing, I'll be quick. There was a study, and I can't remember what university did it, but ABC News ran the story. And it basically said that with African American males, and I'm not stereotyping here, but they found in many cases that for African American males, when an incident breaks out and everyone in the room is in danger, the first person to protect everybody is the African American male. So I'm not saying all Black men are that way, but I'm saying there's something in the Black male where a man has to be a man. If I can't be the man, I'm not going to be involved in this situation. Because I asked my dad once, why is it that some Black men are not there for their kids or for their family? And he explained it to me. He said, if a Black man can't be in a situation where he can have a job and work and support and be a man that a man needs to be a man, he won't be in the situation. I'll go get a beer. So I can't explain it, but he tried to explain it to me. But I think there were so many underlying messages there about Black people, history, and Black men.
All right, thank you. Beecher?
Sorry, just unmuting. I finally figured out how to raise my hands. Took me a little while. I know. Don't go on Zoom often. But no, I think just now it's gotten lost a little bit, but with what Prince was talking about earlier and the three men and, talking about the Koreans owning the store and, why don't you own a store? And it made me think, like, not only is there lack of privilege from the get-go, but the self-talk and the self-doubt that we see generation after generation, and it does something to you. There's no coming out of that easily. If you in the back of your mind are thinking, oh geez, that would take too much money, I wouldn't be able to get a loan, which probably at the time is pretty accurate. Like, how am I going to get money? You just feel defeated at that point. So yeah, getting a beer is, I've done that over little things like, oh, I'm in a job I can't stand, I'm never going to be able to get a new job, I'll just drink tonight. And I'm the first to say I have a lot of privilege in front of me. I can get things much easier. And these are three guys that have probably had, crap thrown at them their entire lives. And they so badly want that. And it's like, all the chips are against them. So, it's hard to see how you get out of that. And it's a lot easier to talk about it than take action, because where do you even start at that point?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Prince.
Yeah, I was just thinking about like in that particular scene about this, the whole thing about, the Italian guy having a business, all these immigrants having a business. Well, I just wish, honestly, that at least amongst Black people and amongst non-Black communities, that we would stop this whole minority model myth, like, kind of a thing. Because, there's some studies that are coming out, that, for immigrants to even come here, they're given a chance to have businesses. And in fact, it's required, almost like they really encourage, those things. So, and those things just aren't available, honestly, for Black folks. It just isn't, right? Like, we saw what went down a year ago or a couple years ago here in Cincinnati, where Fifth Third was this class lawsuit about the ways in which they only give automation or like auto loans and credit cards or whatever to Black folks instead of actually having, business loans and, and things like that. So it's just really interesting, though, like the ways in which the race towards property, right, in our country, and what the film also highlights. The race towards property is also like, it's connected to your identities as well. Like, it's a way that we place values on people, and based on those values, you can do the best that you can, like, and if that happens, it's always your fault, right? Those kind of a thing. So I don't know if I'm making sense, but those are just things that, like, you know, like that's my biggest problem with the film, right? Like, you know, they're talking about, you know, you just have to, you know, start up your business like these other guys. It's like, well, we can't. Like, you know, I mean, poor dollars circulating in a poor community does not create wealth. Like, you know, so it's just, why are they playing games on us, bro? Like, you know, that's how I feel. Like, this is so insulting. And I'm just, maybe it's the Marxist in me. I don't know. But like, you know, I'm just really, I don't know. I don't know. I'm just
Okay. So it is 1:15, and I don't want to cut off conversation yet. So I'm going to call on John, and then I want to pose kind of like one big last question before we leave. And we're going to try to wrap up about 1:30, but we'll see exactly. It could be a little before or after. But John, go, and then I'm going to pose my last question.
I can wait with my comment. If you want to go ahead with the big one, it might come up. It's just the idea that what Prince was talking about. I think that we tend to value property so highly, and I read something that Spike Lee said about the end of the film, and I don't know if you were going to talk about that, but he said white people ask me sometimes, did Mookie do the right thing, throwing the trash can through the window? And he said, I've never had a black person ask me that because they understand why he did it. And was it the right thing? I think that's what the movie poses. And Spike, again, I saw an interview with Spike Lee where he said, well, it's not easy to tell what the right thing to do is, but I can sure tell you what the wrong thing to do is, and that's killing Radio Raheem. People get all upset about throwing a trash can through a car or through a store window, but how many people are really getting the worst thing in the movie, which is the killing of Radio Raheem. Mm-hmm. So we may not always know what the right thing to do is, but you sure know what the wrong thing is.
Yeah, and my question does kind of frame that a little bit, but I always have a historical background to it. So Brandy, go ahead, and then I'll go.
Oh, I just wanted to make a quick point that I think it's kind of sad that at the end of his movie, he dedicated it to, I want to believe, 4 people. And I just want to say that if he made that movie now, isn't it sad that he would have had to have at least 2 to 3 pages of dedications to, you know, to fallen victims that have happened since then? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Like, I just think that's like mind-blowing that it would literally go from 4 names to at least 4 pages, you know, in the roll-offs.
Right. And the 4 names would, I mean, that doesn't nearly encompass the history of violence in this country. But so I was going to kind of pose this kind of last thing, and I think what John said was interesting in terms of, you know, you ask a black person, did Mookie do the right thing? And you ask a white person, did Mookie do the right thing? Yeah, so, but I want to frame it in kind of this historical reference, and that is back on Martin Luther King Day this year. I noticed a lot of social media posts and stuff that had, you know, Martin Luther King quotes, and several of them, including ours, did some variation on Martin Luther King's quote, "The time is always right to do what is right." But we at the Harry Beecher Stowehouse tend to, if we quote someone, we try not to do just a generic, you know, quote, this person said this, but we say, well, when and where did they say this? So the quote that we pulled from Martin Luther King for that day, the time is always right to do what is right, he said on October 24th, 1964 at Oberlin College. And we picked that particular reference point because we have a relationship with Oberlin College in terms of, you know, in the 1830s, the Lane Seminary debates about abolition took place right here on the Lane Seminary campus, which is the only building left standing from the Lane Seminary campus. And the Lane Seminary students were debating, you know, immediate emancipation, and they were debating the idea of colonization, and the students came down on the side of abolition. And because of a lot of different things, they got in trouble, and most of them left to go to Oberlin College. So, you know, Oberlin has this kind of relationship with the history of this place in terms of, you know, that's where the Lane Seminary students ended up. And so when I look at, you know, okay, Martin Luther King is talking about Oberlin College, or talking at Oberlin College, which is, you know, this abolitionist stronghold in the 1800s. And he's saying the time is always right to do what is right. But I also look at the date, because we tend to think of the civil rights movement as this big monolith, but things happened in a certain order that we know now, but they didn't know as they were going through. So for example, this particular statement was made a year and 3 months after the March on Washington and the I Have a Dream speech. It happened a year and a month after the Birmingham bombing of the church where the 4 little girls were killed. It happened 4 months before the March in Selma and the Edmund Pettus Bridge. So it's like these things had happened already, but some things that we think of in the civil rights movement hadn't happened yet. So that context of, you know, what is the right thing to do? And so I go back to the you know, the lines in the movie where DeMayer says to Mookie, always do the right thing. And Mookie's like, that's it? Mayor's like, that's it. So what is the right thing?
Right.
I guess is the big question. What does that mean? What is the right thing? Talk amongst yourselves. Tell me what you think.
I think the right thing is to follow your conscience and to consider that all people are human beings and there is an underlying level of love and consideration everyone should have, and don't break the law, just do the right thing. I think he was telling him to tap into his own implicit bias or in his own feelings in terms of what, you know, treat people the way they want to be treated, not necessarily treating people the way you want to be treated. But I think he was saying that, you know, take into consideration the needs of others.
Anybody else? What is the right thing? Brandy?
That is such a loaded question, because I mean, it could mean don't respond in a way that you're going to regret, you know, or kind of like she said, it's like you treat people the way you want to be treated, but just treat people with the same respect that you want to be treated with, more so to speak.
Yeah. John?
I think the right thing depends on who you are, how much privilege you have, what your history is, and I think he's after, I think I've said this before, an understanding that lives are more important than property. And don't get hung up on somebody worrying about a building being burned or something when human lives are being lost. And human lives have been lost for a long time unfairly, and people who are forging ahead with their lives, those of us who are white, who are privileged, have to understand or try to understand what other people are going through. I think that's what the movie says to me.
Anybody else?
Yeah, I really like everything right now, to be honest. I think, you know, in watching this film, my answers always change because my education and how I'm learning things changes. But I think what doing the right thing at least means to me is kind of going off John, is understanding our relationship to property here, right? Like, you know, I don't really care, right? I'm not here, like, right, to change hearts and minds, you know, and I think those things, you need to do those things. I'm not belittling those things, but there is a structure here in this place that exacerbates those things. And the more that I keep thinking about, you know, what does it mean to do the right thing? is being brave enough to understand our relationship, you know, honestly, to those things. So you know, why, like, if we want to have better relationships with each other, then why can't we have a system, an economic system that does just that? You know, that's just really what it comes down to, at least, you know, for me. And I just think our labor movements, you know, and especially in Ohio, the United States, is the only thing that has actually made America really great. To be honest, it was always intersectional. It was always, you know, across racial and class lines. What happened? What happened to that? So,
Thank you. Amy?
I think people have already said it's a very loaded and complex question. Christina, thanks for ending on that. You sure you want us to finish at 1:30? But I think so the first time, and I mentioned this earlier, the first time I saw the movie was when I was a teenager, and then to watch it now, especially in light of what's happened in the last year or a few years, it gives a different shading to the events in the film. And like, I was watching the film going, well, that's the wrong thing to do. That's definitely wrong. That's, oh no, you did not just do that. But I don't know that Spike Lee answers that, or has the film answer what the right thing is, because there's so many instances throughout the film where it's clear, at least clear to me as a viewer, that that was the wrong choice to make. I mean, the easy platitude is to say, and I do firmly believe this, that the right thing to do is always be respectful of other people's humanity. But it's not that easy, because throughout the film, there are instances where you go, no, you did not just do that. No, that's wrong, that's wrong, that's wrong. But so I think it's open to so much interpretation.
All right. Anybody else want to weigh in? Brandy, were you going to say something?
Oh, no.
Oh, okay. Sorry, it just looked like.
Oops, sorry about that.
That's okay. That's okay. So as I was rewatching this earlier this week, my 16-year-old son came in as I was watching it, and he like watched the last half hour with me. He was like, I don't have time to, you know, homework, whatever. I don't have time, but he ended up sitting and watching the last half hour with me. And he's seen the whole movie before, because I made him and his brother watch it last fall. But as we were, you know, kind of wrapping up, the movie was ending. I was like, so did Mookie do the right thing? And he's like, nobody did the right thing. And I was like, well, okay, that is a good perspective. But Cam, you wanted to add something?
No, I just say, you know, do the right thing. The sequel, what the prosecution of the murderers of Radio Raheem. Because we I mean, that's an unopened door that it's never addressed. It ends. It never is addressed. Unfortunately, it's just up to the viewer to assume that this man who's been executed in public in Bedford-Stuyvesant in front of the masses is deceased and just rides off in the back of the car. No ambulance, just in the back of the car.
Right.
And that's how it ends. So, you know, do the right thing is one, let's not stay in neutral. Let's move forward. And two, the sequel, the prosecution of the murderers of Radio Raheem. It's been real. You all have a good one.
Brandy?
I was just going to say that's actually a perfect example of how people feel like police brutality is handled now. It's just kind of swept under the rug. They get off. Somehow it was found to be justifiable homicide and nobody goes to jail. It's just like, oh, they were killed because they obviously did something wrong, or why else would they have killed them? So let's just go on about our day and act as if nothing's happened.
Right. John?
This movie also, oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
Gina and then John. Gina.
I was just going to say, this movie also answered the question, why is it that when there's a riot or a big fight in the community, Black people burn down their own buildings? Well, this movie brought out the fact that they didn't own it. They don't own any of those buildings. They were burning down things that did not belong to them. And maybe the frustration from the lack of ownership might have affected it. And then people have to understand with a lot of situations and riots throughout this country, there were outside people who came in and set fires. But anyway, the bottom line is this movie sort of told the backstory of the frustration within people, which might cause them to do something crazy, like burn down a building.
Mm-hmm. So it gave us the whole perspective of the whole day and everything that had happened that day, which led up to this boiling over of frustration and so forth. Yes. John?
Just a small point, Spike Lee did make a very short movie this past summer, in which it was about a 90-second movie, in which he spliced together the killing of George Floyd and Eric Garner with the murder of Radio Raheem. And it was on his website or something. I haven't actually seen it, but I've seen a still from it and read an article about it. So he's definitely making the kind of connections that people are talking about in this discussion.
Okay. All right. Well, you know, I think this is a film that people could talk about for days, and we have demonstrated that. But I think I have really enjoyed having this conversation with people and thinking through these ideas, because, you know, this is, like I said at the beginning, you know, it's a fictional story, but it's something that could have happened. And that, you know, that really also speaks to Harriet Beecher Stowe. She told a fictional story about something that really did happen. So it's a way to wake people up to the truth, so to speak. And, you know, Spike Lee was using his power of voice to be able to do that. And that's, you know, kind of the last little tie-in I will make. But I have appreciated all of your participation today. I think it's been a great conversation. I do want to thank our sponsor again, Donna's Fabulous Furs, and also let you know that we are working with the Ohio History Connection on some evaluation things. So I will send you in the next day or two just a brief evaluation of the discussion that we had, and your feedback is interesting. The only movie where Spike did not use the dolly shot. Oh yeah, yeah. Like there's no. What do you mean by that, Gina?
You know, in most of his movies,
Go
ahead.
Okay, yeah, where it rolls. Yeah.
No, he zooms in. It's like he's on a camera and the camera's just dollying back, and the background is real fast. I can't describe it. Does anybody know what I'm talking about?
Okay. All right. Okay. So that's it. Prince, did you have any final words or thoughts?
No, not really. I mean, I'm just taking it all in. I'm learning new things. You know, it's always great to see the film again through you all's kind of perspectives. There's a lot of things that in my 12 years of watching this movie, like I totally missed. I was like, well, I never thought about that. But I'm looking forward to having more of these courageous conversations.
All right. Well, thank you all, and have a great rest of your Saturday. And don't forget, our next discussion group is on Wednesday night, and that is, well, I'll let John say it because I will get the name wrong.
It's called, well, it's part of the After Uncle Tom's Cabin, Black Voices for Justice series that we're doing all year. And the two authors we're looking at, two stories by each of them, are Charles Chestnut and Alice Dunbar Nelson.
So, and all of the information about how to register for it and the suggested readings are on our website, so go check that out. And we hope to see you again on Wednesday evening at 7 o'clock for that. So, thank you all. I appreciate it.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
See you all.